Gunpla is a very interesting hobby, falling into a sort of middle ground for modelers and figure collectors. I feel like every collector has to try out mecha model kits at some point in their life, and Gunpla is the way to go. And in 2015, Bandai released the HGUC 191 RX-78-2 Gundam Revive, a sort of modern remake of the original HGUC 021 Gundam. And for its time, this was definitely one of, if not the go-to beginner Gunpla kit to come out. Its fair price, accessibility, and iconic face made it the perfect gateway into this hobby back then. But as of July 2022, the RX-78-2 Revive has already been out for 7 years now, and there's definitely a lot of newer options for 1/144th scale 782 Gundams and beginner Gunpla kits, which even started a new line of model kits known as entry grades, which are cheap versions of mobile suits we all know and love. But this was still a kit I always wanted to get. I just started my Gunpla collecting hobby and I wanted to know what was the original gateway into this hobby before I started. And my main question, how does this hold up after so long? And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised for a kit that's 7 years old. So here's the HGUC RX-78-2 Revive snap built out of the box with some cleanup and panel lining and the safety numbers removed. You can never go wrong with the classic Gundam. It's a simple and appealing design, quite recognizable, and it still looks super cool. Now the first thing that might stick out to you is its proportions. It's very clean and simple compared to figures like say the real grade or even the modern high grades. The more rounded and beveled edge sculpt mixed with the warm but bright colors gives this figure a very nice toyetic and retro feel. And I honestly quite enjoy this more anime-esque and classic design. It's quite unique. Well, that's not really a compliment. I mean, a lot of high grades look unique, for better or for worse. With a visible lack of panel lines and the lankier physique, this is more akin to 2020's entry-grade Gundam. The panel lines that do exist are quite nice and pop really well, keeping this design from looking too outdated. It's just enough to look quite nice. But obviously first glance already tells you that the color separation isn't at its finest. You have a sheet of stickers that I somehow didn't even use all of them. How does that even happen? Most of the stickers actually go on the head besides the crotch chevron, and this is definitely where the age of the kit starts to show, since modern versions like the entry grade Beyond Global and Cuckoo's Dawn all have separated crotch chevrons. I personally don't mind it, but I know this isn't for some people, so that is a bit of a shame. Another point of contention is the visible seam on the head, which by modern standards is pretty outdated, or hell, even 2015 since HGIBO kits didn't have seams like that, or even my Unicorn Gundam from 2009. I don't really mind this issue, but I can't deny that this is quite the outdated technique. So taking everything into account, some of it is outdated, but the minor flaws don't take away from it. This still looks quite nice, not the greatest but definitely not the worst. If I could sum this up in one word, I'd call this look classic, or at least basic, which by no means are at all a bad thing. The accessories are a pretty decent handful. It's the bare essentials in my opinion for a good 782 kit. It comes with these standard holding hands, which allows you to hold the beam saber sword on the back. And yes, it does come with 2 beam effects for you to dual wield beam sabers. But this pair serves another purpose. The iconic shield, which I did panel line, don't ask why it's stressed, can plug into both sides of the arm. And for extra stability, you can pull out this handle, put it in the hands, and then attach it onto the figure. And if you're not gonna use the shield, there is a port on the back for you to place the shield into. Looks pretty cool, honestly. You also have a single right trigger finger hand, which can hold the iconic beam rifle, which has a movable sight and a handle. And yes, I did end up giving this a bit of a dry brush. I just like it like that. Just split the hand, put the rifle, and put the cover back on. And since the handle and sight moves around, you could use the left holding hand to hold on to the rifle. Also no, the beams don't fit into the barrel, so no shooting effects. But if you want even more firepower, you have the Hyper Bazooka, which I also dry brushed. You put it in the hands the same way as the beam rifle, but instead you have a shoulder mount on the bazooka, and honestly, this isn't really working out for me, it's not that cool. But you do have a white piece that clips onto the body of the bazooka, and there is a little cover on the back of the figure that you take off and plug the bazooka into. I honestly much prefer this look. Before you ask, there's no way to store the beam rifle on the figure, so you'll just have to put it in the hands or a spare parts bag. And my favorite accessory, a pair of dynamic relaxed hands, which adds so much to the figure, giving those poses a lot more life and beauty. So this is the part of the video where the age of the kit really shows. Being a kit from 2015, it has that same simplistic feel and look to its build as the other ones I've built from around that time period. With a majority of joints still having a polycap construction and the plastic feeling more rigid and heavy, it definitely feels solid. The joints themselves have a pretty good amount of range. The most I feel is lacking is the torso, but it's not that bad. The side skirts do pop off sometimes, which is a bit annoying, but you can pop it on back easy. And also, I did split the front skirts. This is honestly the first time I haven't been too scared to pose a small kit like this around. With its quality, it feels nice to play around with, and nothing feels like it's gonna break. So overall, a satisfying posing experience. Though some joints are limited, it's still a pretty basic set of articulation. This is the most standard height high grade I own, honestly. 1/144th scale and very nicely palm-sized. Here it is with Amado's other flagship model, the entry-grade new Gundam, which unfortunately did break on me, and my custom painted high-grade Unicorn Gundam. So my question was a retrospective one of, does this still hold up? 7 years is a decently long time, and Bandai has gotten extremely better with their model kits. And honestly, even with the age of the kit in the specific model having newer and better versions, I wouldn't really call this obsolete or inferior than these other versions. Yes, the build feels old, the plastic isn't the best, it has a polycap construction, and the articulation is pretty generic. But even so, taking its entire package into account, this is still a pretty good kit. A nice gateway for beginners and a fun little quick build for an experienced builder. Not the most impressive, but definitely isn't obsolete, inferior, or to be dismissed. So that concludes my review for the HGUC RX-78-2 Gundam Revive. And honestly, I didn't care to get this kit back then, but now that I do have it, I don't regret a thing. Comparing it to other 1/144th scale versions of the 78-2, I do wonder what this would look like with modifications, a bit of that customization love. Now, I can't scribe properly, my failures are well documented. But I can do something I haven't tried before. Guess there's a new video on the way.